Hey, Post to Post, I'm Steve-O. I'm in my hometown in Ontario, California at the Citizens Bank Arena watching the Ontario Reign play against my San Diego Gulls. You're watching Post to Post.
Hello and welcome to Post, the channel where we discuss all things hockey and all teams. I was looking at the potential Stanley Cup matchups, and in our podcast we usually talk about if the playoffs started today, who would face each other. And that got me thinking about, okay, well, what would be the best actual Stanley Cup final matchup? And then I started to break it down into categories. What's the best matchup for the NHL as far as business is concerned? What's the best matchup for Canadians? What's the best matchup for Americans? So I started to kind of go through all these little categories and pick out the best matchups that I thought would be the best. So
all right.
I just wanted to get your opinion. We haven't really discussed this.
No, we haven't.
So the first one I have down here is for the NHL, for the actual business of the NHL. What do you think is the best financial and growth potential finals, Stanley Cup finals? What two teams?
Now, do we have to talk about teams that are contending right now?
Yes, actually, that's a good point. Sorry, I did leave off, I left off some teams from my decision here, but that doesn't mean that these teams can't climb back into the standings and make the playoffs.
That's true.
So in the West, I've left off Los Angeles and Chicago, and in the East, I've left off Florida, Philadelphia, New Jersey, Ottawa, and Detroit. You
left the Rangers in?
I left the Rangers in. They're kind of right there in the potential. Okay. And again, Florida, Philadelphia, these teams it's not impossible for these teams to go on a run, win 10 games, and be in a playoff spot. So I'm not saying that these teams won't make the playoffs. I'm just, right now, statistically, they should miss the playoffs. So any other teams except for the ones I just mentioned. So for the NHL, best financial and growth potential as far as growing the game.
Well, from the East, I'd say the Rangers. And from the West, for the NHL's growth and intentions, it's got to be a team in the U.S. So, and you've left the Kings out, so I'd say maybe the Sharks. I'd say Rangers and Sharks.
Okay, why would you say the Rangers? Just because it's the biggest metropolitan?
It's the hugest sports market in the East of the U.S., probably the entire U.S. Although the fan base is split between New Jersey and the Islanders. And some of the Connecticut fan base probably goes to Boston, where they otherwise would go to New York. But still, I think the Rangers in the finals would be a massive story, even in a big city like New York that has a lot of big stories every day.
Okay, yeah, you're not wrong. That's a good choice. I chose Pittsburgh from the East just based on the fact that they've won a few Stanley Cups in recent past. Their fan base has literally exploded because of Crosby and Malkin and all these people.
Yep.
They have a ton of fans, a mass following right now. So I feel like they would just overwhelm the financial side of things, merchandise, and even growing more fans and just growing more and more. Yeah. So I felt Pittsburgh might be the best choice from the East. The West was harder for me because there's a lot of potential teams in the West that could be really good financially for the NHL. I felt like Vegas was a choice because everyone knows what happened last year, and I feel like everyone would just get on that train once again and would love to see them actually come through and win in the finals instead of lose. So I feel like there's a lot of money-making potential and a lot of new fan potential if Vegas goes all the way. The other one I thought was Nashville. Thinking specifically about if I chose Pittsburgh from the East, Nashville I felt was a logical choice because of the rematch. Now, Nashville lost to Pittsburgh in the finals a couple of years ago. Nashville was the underdog, came in the playoffs in 8th, swept Chicago, went all the way to the finals, looked like they could have maybe beat Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, they ended up losing. So they want revenge, and that fan base just exploded after that run. You couldn't even buy a Nashville jersey online. So I feel like if Nashville or Vegas made it to the finals, their fan bases, which are already huge right now, would just explode again. So I felt like those three teams, Pittsburgh, Vegas, and Nashville, would be the best financial choices and for fan base too for the NHL. Now, what do you think is the best matchup for the fans?
Oh boy.
Well, just the general hockey fan.
Like just to see on-ice product or
no, just to,
rivalry stuff?
Underdog status, rivalries, maybe a team that hasn't won the Stanley Cup in a long time, but maybe deserves to win the Stanley Cup. Just basically a good story.
I think you've given a good case for Vegas to do a comeback and then win where they lost last time. But there are a lot of other teams that would be great stories if they got back in. Colorado is one in particular with Nathan McKinnon, arguably one of the best, if not the best player in the league on a given week. To see him excelling in the playoffs and taking his team back to the Stanley Cup. They haven't been there for decades.
2002 or 2003, something like that.
Yeah, so that would be cool. But there's lots of great stories. But I think Colorado would be my greatest story from the West.
Okay. From
the East, when you look at teams that haven't been in for a while but are knocking on the door again, Carolina's just not done as well as I'd like them to do. Not doing as well as I predicted them to do earlier in the year. Otherwise, I'd say Carolina. But for the fans just wanting to see great hockey, probably Boston or a team like that.
It's not about just the hockey. It's about the story. It's about...
Yeah. I think there's a bit of a story if Boston goes back in.
Okay.
Really good goaltending duo. Chera's probably last chance.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's an interesting story. Although he's got the cup, he's not like not a Ray Burke situation.
Yeah,
where Ray toiled for years and years and years and never won the cup, and actually had to go to Colorado to win it. So I think that would be a decent story as well. So
Tuukka Rask also probably wants to win a cup. He has obviously done it with Boston before, but Tim Thomas was the main goalie at the time.
Right.
So Rask probably wants to lead the force as far as that.
So, that's true too.
That's a good pick.
Yep.
I chose Toronto from the East, just based on the fact that it's been
51
over 50 years since they won the cup. The last time they won the cup, color TVs weren't even invented. So
they were invented, just no one could afford them.
Yeah. As a Canadiens fan, I don't want Toronto to win the Stanley Cup, but from this category, as a fan, I think Toronto has to win the Stanley Cup. There are so many just general hockey fans who would really appreciate the storyline of the Maple Leafs winning the cup after 50 years. It would be a worldwide story. It would elevate hockey to the front page status, in my opinion. If the Maple Leafs won the cup, it would be massive news around the world. So
now Toronto's always on the front page in Toronto.
That's true.
And even in July, you might see a front page story about the Toronto Maple Leafs in the local papers, just because Toronto's the center of the universe. But I know what you mean, and I agree with you that outside of Toronto, it would become the big story. Yeah.
From the West, I chose Vegas as the team because if you look at, say you're a fan of Pittsburgh, Nashville's a good story, but you can't cheer for Nashville because you have a history with them. I tried to pick the team that has the least amount of history with each other team, and that's the Vegas Golden Knights. It's really easy to cheer for the Vegas Golden Knights because you don't really have a reason to hate them.
Yeah.
So I felt like, from a fan perspective, there would be a lot of fans from other fan bases of teams join together and cheer for Vegas. So I felt like in this category for the fans, there's not even anyone close as far as other team that would be best for this. But anyways, Canada is the next topic. What do you think is the best matchup as far as for the country of Canada?
Oh man!
So obviously we're talking about the Canadian teams.
Yeah. So if the Stanley Cup final comes down to two Canadian teams, so you've got 4 in the West, 3 in the East.
Yep.
One of those 3 in the East, Montreal, Toronto, or Ottawa. Obviously Toronto. It has a huge fan base, although not as big as they think they have, because I think Montreal has a very large fan penetration across the country.
As far as globally.
Yeah, but Toronto is certainly the team for southern and southwestern Ontario for sure, with fans all over Atlantic Canada and some in the West. From the West, of the 4 teams that are there, I like them all for various reasons, but I would love to see Winnipeg in the final.
I chose Winnipeg from my West, and I also chose Toronto. So we have actually the exact same picks here for the same reasons. I was going to choose Edmonton with McDavid. That would be pretty big for Canada, but he'll have his moment, I feel.
Yeah.
Calgary would – I actually have 2 scenarios here, but Calgary-Montreal was my other scenario.
That would be amazing.
Because it's an 89 rematch.
An 86 rematch.
An 86 rematch. Yeah. Montreal hasn't been to the finals since 93. Calgary hasn't been to the finals since 89, the last time they won. So
correct.
It would be a really good rematch, I guess you could call it, and also good for Canada. So those 2 matchups, Calgary versus Montreal, and Winnipeg versus Toronto, I felt would be the best from Canada. That's not to say that Vancouver doesn't deserve to be there, or Ottawa doesn't deserve to be there, or Edmonton doesn't deserve to be there. I just felt like,
Oh yeah, they all deserve it if they get there.
yeah, like domestically, I think that's the best.
Yeah.
Those are the best matchups. What about the United States? This one's so much more difficult for so many different reasons.
The best Canadian matchup for American viewers?
No, the best American matchup for Americans.
Yeah, and I think that's really what I was trying to answer in the first question.
Okay.
The New York and San Jose situation.
So you still San Jose and New York.
I think that works for the fans.
Okay. I went back and forth so much with this one. I felt like, oh, well, no, Nashville should be there. And then, well, no, yeah, the Rangers kind of deserve to be there as well. Like, that would be huge. But I actually ended up on Dallas versus Buffalo, the 99 rematch, because everyone, well, the majority of you know what happened in 99 with the skate in the crease. I just feel like Buffalo, there is no team that deserves to go back to the finals other than Buffalo. Their fan base has suffered since 99. They got to be there. And then Dallas, what's the closest Dallas has been since then?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
But you don't remember, because I don't either.
I don't.
That's the point.
Yeah.
So those two teams, as far as American teams, you have the history there, the rematch. It would be, as far as, I was going to say, I'm looking for as far as broadcasting, there's so much of a story you could build around that. If you're NBC or if you're whatever broadcasting, like there's just that historical story from 99 that you could just build that series up with. And I just felt like it would be a great All-American matchup.
Yep, good picks.
Underdogs. What do you think is the best underdog matchup?
Oh, man. I think you've got to count Montreal as an underdog
This year.
out of the East. Nobody, no sane person, a few crazy ones, but if no sane people predicted Montreal would make it into the playoffs, and they still might not.
Yeah.
But currently they're in a playoff spot by quite a margin. They've got a 7-point spread on Carolina, I think it is, and for the wild card, for the last wild card, if it came to that. And Carolina only has 3 games in hand, so if they won them all, they're still behind Montreal. So you have to think that Montreal, if they did make the playoffs, they would be a significant underdog. They're likely going to be in 7th or 8th place out of the East, a ragtag team of people that are other people's rejects in some cases, kind of like Vegas was last year. You never know. From the West, for underdogs, I'd have to go maybe back to Colorado or even to Vegas, because Vegas, no one thinks Vegas can do it twice.
Still, and that's the thing.
Isn't that funny?
It's crazy how that works. Like, of course, they can't get back to the finals again. I can't underestimate them. Like, they're in what, 3rd or 4th in the league right now.
Yeah.
They're not an underdog.
Nope.
But they are. Like, it's hard to explain. But they are my pick from the West, the Vegas Golden Knights. I just feel like they still are mentally the underdog. Even the players probably think that they're a bit of an underdog. So from the East, I chose Buffalo. Buffalo has the chemistry on paper. They are not expected to go far in the playoffs, even if they make it.
Right.
They're up against the wall there. So I think that they could surprise a lot of people. I think they would, if they could go deep, they would be a true underdog story. So We'll see. Now, most deserving. What do you think is the most deserving matchup? Who from the West is most deserving to be in the finals? Who from the East is the most deserving to be in the finals?
Deserving based on play?
Deserving based on city, play, maybe poor luck in the past, who maybe got to the finals in the past and didn't win, or a city that really deserves a championship has been waiting a long time, or...
Yeah, I think Buffalo out of the East is a great story that way. And it's not just the hockey fans of Buffalo, it's the football fans of Buffalo.
Yes.
When you've got the Bills, was it 4 Super Bowls in a row they went to and lost all 4 or something like that back 15 years ago? That's got to be just devastating to get that close and never get it. So I think Buffalo's been a beat-up market sports-wise for a while. And they don't have basketball to fall back on. So they've only got the 2 teams, Sabres and the Bills. From the West, I think Minnesota or someone like Minnesota has not been there.
That's a good pick because Minnesota's such a massive hockey cloud of craziness.
Yeah.
They deserve a championship based on like hockey is huge in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And they've never really come close. So, yeah, I like that pick.
If you win a hockey championship based on fan prayers, then it's Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I chose San Jose from the West. I felt like, man, San Jose's been good almost every year in the past 15 years. You have to admit that they've been a pretty dominant team. They've gotten far a lot of years. They've got to the finals one year. How many times have they been to the conference finals? They've been so close so many times and just haven't won. So I felt like, I feel like they're due, is basically. So that's
good pick.
That's my decision from the West. From the East, I'm not happy about this pick, but I think the Tampa Bay Lightning, they won in 2004. Great. But if you think about how many, kind of like the San Jose Sharks, how many times have they been to the finals and the conference finals? Last year, lost against Washington in the conference finals. A couple of years ago, they lost against, I think it was LA or Chicago, one of the two. Like, they got so close so many times in the past 10 years that it's just right there. So I feel like both those teams in the kind of same scenario there. Okay, this one's a little funny. Most uninteresting. What do you think the most uninteresting matchup would be? For
Canadian fans, or
just
in
fans
particular, just fans generally?
Fans in general.
The most uninteresting matchup?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I think it would be Columbus from the East.
Okay, why Columbus?
Just because they're surrounded by, I think, more stronger fan base markets than they have.
Okay.
They've got Pittsburgh, they've got Detroit, they've got Chicago, not too far away around that side of things, and they've got all the big markets in the East. So I think Columbus is like the
and that's not an insult. They're just they just happen to be forgot about because there's other strong markets.
Yeah,
you're right. Geographically, yeah.
And as much as Nashville is an interesting story, if it's Columbus against Nashville, they're not actually that far apart, even though they're in different conferences. I think that would be a matchup that a lot of the rest of the league wouldn't watch.
I would have to disagree with Nashville. I think a lot of people will be watching that based on the fact that they almost won a couple of years ago, and they'd like to see if they could do it again. But I see what you mean by Nashville. Would you watch that final?
I think I always would.
Really?
Oh yeah, I think I want to see. Yeah, would I watch game 1 or 2? Maybe not. But as it's getting closer, if the final gets interesting, I'll always watch what I think might be the game that they hand the cup out. I want to see the cup being won live.
Yeah.
And I don't really care who's playing. If my team's out, then I can relax.
Because I know you like Nashville, so
I really like Nashville.
I'm surprised by that pick. Yeah. But I guess you're probably thinking from the general hockey.
I'm just talking, okay. I'm just thinking my own personal preference. Yeah, Nashville's one of the teams I'd like to see playing out of the West, and I think I would be emotionally engaged in it a bit.
Okay.
But if they were playing Columbus, I think that would be a big letdown for the fan base.
Okay.
If Nashville was playing Toronto or Nashville was playing Boston, I think I'd have a lot more amp going on to watch it. Yeah.
Okay. From the West, I chose Arizona. It's not that Arizona isn't exciting to watch. They are. They've got a lot of skilled players. I just feel like their fan base is so small that the coverage would be lackluster. Like, there wouldn't be... You see stories of we'll go back to Nashville, for example. When they play a team in the playoffs outside, they bring a car in and you can, I think, donate money and then beat it up with a sledgehammer.
But when they played Winnipeg, they brought a plane in.
Exactly.
Beat the plane up. I was very upset.
It wasn't a jet, though. We talked about that. But it's just, I don't think that you'd see stuff like that, just the aura of hockey madness. I don't think you'd see that in Arizona. Maybe you would. I don't know. Well, I'd love to find out. But I still think it would be the most uninteresting team from the West. From the East, I'm not happy about this because Carolina is pretty high on my list of teams that I like. But I think Carolina, just the fact that they won in 2006. They haven't really done a whole lot. Their fan base is not doing that great. They having a hard time filling the arena and stuff. I just feel like, as a general hockey fan, like a general Canadian who only usually watches their team and maybe some hockey elsewhere, they would not watch a Carolina-Arizona final. They just wouldn't. There's not a chance. I know hockey fans that I talk to on a daily basis at work and out and about who love hockey and would not watch that matchup. So, yeah, that's all I got.
All right.
Any categories I didn't hit that you want to throw out? Or
No, I guess one thing that we didn't hit directly was what would be you asked about the best case from the NHL business point of view.
Yeah.
What would be the worst case from the NHL business point of view?
Arizona,
the matchup the
Florida?
NHL would not want to see. You're probably right. You're probably right. I think any team that involves Montreal or Toronto or Edmonton in particular would still get a lot of eyeballs in the States. Edmonton particularly because just of the popularity that the team seems to have in its other markets. We know from the NBC schedule this year that Edmonton actually is featured a few times.
yeah.
When they normally wouldn't be. So I think the Americans know that Edmonton is a fun team to watch. And in Toronto, of course, you've got Matthews, who is an American.
Yeah,
he's really the best player on the team, and I think Americans would gravitate to that a little bit. Montreal has some American players. Montreal's always had a good-sized stable of American college players and junior players. So, I think that NBC or the sports community could find a way to make that interesting for American viewers. Calgary, Vancouver, not so much. Winnipeg, maybe not so much. But, yeah, I think that there's probably a dartboard in Gary Bettman's office where he throws darts and tries to knock off those teams that he knows would not be popular in the finals for the TV contract.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I think another good matchup as far as most deserving, St. Louis and Buffalo.
St. Louis, that's a great example. The last time Toronto won the Cup was 1967, and 3 months later, St. Louis took to the ice for the first time ever, and they've never won the Cup.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because St. Louis has not won the Cup for a year less than Toronto.
Yeah.
And they've never won a Cup.
And St. Louis has had some stellar teams in the past 20 years. So.
They have. And even the first few years when they just got into the finals accidentally because it was the East just beat up on the West the way it was rigged.
Yeah.
And it was rigged. St. Louis ended up coming out of the West and just getting hammered 4 games straight or 5-1 or 4-1. But yes, St. Louis fans have been in the trenches for a long, long time and had some very good teams that just haven't had success at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Cool.
well, thanks for the conversation. I appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed it at home. Let me know down below in the comments, who do you think is the best matchups for some of the categories that I mentioned? Curious to know your thoughts and your reasons. So thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Subscribe if you're not, and we'll see you in the next video. Adios.